Today I'm going to do a video about books I haven't read and will probably take me years to read. I've been away because it's been my birthday and I've turned the very grand old age of 24, which for some reason I was really excited about turning 24. I always thought of it as very an adult age. So this video is equally about my birthday, or what I did on my birthday, as much as it is about the books, because I always find that actually where I buy books or when I buy books, they always have like little stories behind them, or I always remember where I buy every single book, and so I thought I would talk about what I did and also the books that I bought. So the first one is Tidelands by Philippa Gregory. Now this is like one of the most insane proofs I think I've ever been given, because it actually has a coin with Philippa Gregory on it and the name of the book and the date, and you can actually take the coin out and it's a proper coin. How cool is that? Like, I just kind of think the person who came up with the idea is just a genius. I love the tagline for this book, and it's a crime to be poor in this country, it's a sin to be old, it's never good to be a woman. As you will all probably know, I'm kind of a massive Philippa Gregory geek, and I actually got to meet her this year because she was at the HarperCollins party, our summer party, which was hosted at the V&A, and I went up to her and basically said how much her books meant to me growing up, and I said to her, you know, that my 11-year-old self would be dying to meet her, so I had to say hello, and she said that she was very, very happy to meet my 11-year-old self. Anyway, so I love Philippa Gregory, mainly because I love kind of history, and in particular the history of women. Yes, I know, I think it's historically accurate, but why I'm interested so much in Tidelands is because it's not the first time Philippa Gregory has ever talked about, you know, someone who isn't royalty, but it is looking at the life of ordinary women, which is a history I'm really interested in, and I just can't wait to read this. Actually getting a proof of an author who basically was the first adult books I ever read just feels like a really big deal. So a huge thank you to Simon & Schuster. The next book is Bone China by Laura Purcell. I love her writing, like I love her books. The Silent Companions is one of the best kind of like neo-Victorian Gothic book I have read, like ghost story, in a really, really long time, and I have just been obsessed with her writing and wanted to read everything, and so when I heard about Bone China, I knew that I would sell my soul to read the book. So thank you, Bloomsbury. They were two books that were sent to me just before my birthday, and it was like the perfect timing because I was having some time off work. For my birthday this year, I went to Paris. You may have already seen a video I did called 12 Hours in Paris, which is basically the fact that I go on day trips to Paris, which sounds like the most extra thing ever, but when you live in London, it like takes me about half an hour to get to St Pancras, and I just get on a really early train. I get the 5:40 train, arrive at Paris at 9:30, come back about 7-8 o'clock, and it's actually cheaper for me to go to Paris for a day than it is to go to York, which is insane. Every time we go, we kind of always set little routes out or places that we want to go and see, and we've already got our next trip planned. But one thing I really wanted to do, which I didn't do when we went in May, was to go to some French bookshops. You may be thinking, Claire, why did you want to go to a French bookshop when you don't speak the language? But I am learning it. One thing that you probably don't know is that when I was young, I was really, really geeky about France and was desperate to live there and really loved learning French. And then in my attempt to reclaim my kind of geekiness, I have kind of decided to go back to that, hence why we've been going back to Paris. And I am currently very, very, very slowly learning French, very, very badly, I should add as well. But it is kind of my ambition to be able to read a book in French eventually, before I'm like 102. I actually already have a couple of French books, and one of them is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, because I'm actually currently kind of like translating them, but not translating. I'm just kind of like looking at the dictionary of every word and looking at the sentence structure and just expanding my vocabulary a little bit more. And so when I was there, I also picked up To the Lighthouse as well, because they're basically my two favourite Virginia Woolf novels. But my aim isn't to read like English books in French, it's actually to be able to read a French book not in translation. And one of my favourite books of all time is Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. It is my life goal to be able to read this one day. After spending the day in Paris, I went to the Tate Britain to see the Van Gogh exhibition, which I kind of thought, you know, he's a really great painter, let's go and see it. But I was totally like overwhelmed by it. It was a fantastic exhibition because it showed me a different Van Gogh to the Van Gogh that I think we all know. I am really interested, as you'll know, like the 19th century, social realism. And what I had no idea about is that Van Gogh was equally as interested in social realism, and in particular in representing real lives of ordinary people in places like London. It was fascinating not just see some of his major work, but actually see some of his depictions of, I don't know, prison life or sorrow, or all his letters, well not all of his letters, but to his brother Theo, which I was really struck by, and how he would do little illustrations to his brother and send them to him. It was really political, looking at kind of the poverty at the time, and it was just fascinating. It was not what I expected at all. It also reminded me a lot of basically my favourite comedian, Hannah Gadsby, in her show Manette, which is on Netflix, and I can't recommend it enough. But she talks about Van Gogh in kind of a section of the show which is about art history, and she basically goes against the narrative which we've kind of built around the romanticising of mental illness around Van Gogh. I was so kind of glad I'd seen that show and then gone to see his work, because it made me see his painting in a different light, and it actually really challenged the narrative we've built around him. One thing I do love about art galleries is that they have like the best shops, and they always have really great bookshops, especially the Tate. Like their bookshops are always really good. But when I went there, I was really happy to see actually they had really created the shop for the exhibition around the books that had inspired Van Gogh. So, you know, we're talking like Felix Holt by George Eliot, and it was actually really nice to see, because a lot of the books kind of formed my MA dissertation, and I'm now annoyed that I didn't do stuff on Van Gogh in my MA, but there's always a next time. When I was in the exhibition, I picked up 2 books. Neither of them are actually like directly about Van Gogh, but they're books that I've been looking at for years. The first one is Inventing the Victorians by Matthew Sweet. I like subversive histories and underground histories of like time periods where we kind of think we know them, and looking at how we've kind of invented the portrayal of the Victorians, and looking at sex work and murder and darker subjects. It's challenging the idea of the Victorians as people who wanted to kind of cover the legs of pianos, or whatever that anecdote is, looking actually how liberated or how radical they were. The next is one of my favourite writers, Alain de Botton, and John Armstrong on art as therapy. It basically talks about kind of what is the point of art. It goes into like philosophical questions about yourself, and it is a kind of introduction, I guess, to art history, and also to how we use art in society, because I think there's a huge perception with art that when you walk around galleries, when you kind of are staring at stuff, and I always sit there thinking like, what should I be thinking? Like, should I be having an emotional moment? Should this change my life? And I'm staring at these paintings thinking like, what am I supposed to be thinking? I'm always up for learning. And I also think this is like one of the prettiest books I've ever seen. Then to end my birthday weekend/week, I went to Kensington and Chelsea. It's one of my favourite boroughs in London, but mainly because I just comment on how posh people are all the time, and I always kind of think like, oh my god, how much money would you have to live there? In Kensington is one of my favourite bookshops, which is like a complete, not a mess, but it's like it doesn't have the organisation that people would expect someone like me to want my books to be in. There are like piles of books by authors. Let's say there's like a pile on Virginia Woolf or a pile of George Orwell, and to find a book you want, you just have to kind of keep going through the pile. And it's a really lovely little shop, and it has a really like nice little reading nook in it. I picked up a book there which I've been looking for a long time. I don't think it's since we've gone out of print. I just think it's kind of become increasingly hard to get a hold of. It's Antonia Fraser, The Weaker Vessel. I read quite a lot of Antonia Fraser's work, especially when I was younger, like her Six Wives of Henry VIII and Mary Queen of Scots and Marie Antoinette, but I just never seemed to get my hand on this one. As I already said when I was talking about Philippa Gregory, I'm really interested in the history of women, and I'm intrigued because Antonia Fraser doesn't just talk about kind of rich women, she talks about milkmaids, and I love how I said milkmaids as a symbol for like working class women, but just different narratives of women's experience. I am really bad at like treating myself. Not that that's a bad thing, but when it's my birthday, I always make so many excuses for buying myself stuff. I think what I should also say based on this book haul is that I actually don't buy books that often, mainly because I am in the very privileged and lucky position to receive proofs, not only because of like my online stuff, but also when you work in publishing, like I am surrounded by a lot of books that I can have and read. So there was something really self-indulgent and kind of wonderful and also slightly guilty about going on such a big spree. And I know for some people this actually won't be that big, but for me it is. The first book I bought is Expectation by Anna Hope, and it's a signed Waterstones edition. It's one thing I'm noticing that Waterstones are doing a lot more now. They're doing like a lot more signed editions and more exclusive content, and it's interesting to see because they're obviously competing with online retailers like Amazon, and that's the kind of stuff that you don't get through Amazon. So I'm always interested to see what Waterstones are doing slightly differently. Anyway, I've seen this book everywhere, and when I say everywhere, I've seen a lot on Instagram, and I am really interested in these type of narratives. It's basically about a group of friends who kind of, they're in London when they were young, and it's about them growing up and realising, you know, their goals, or looking back at their life and their choices, and, you know, well, the expectations that they had of themselves when they were young and how they were going to be when they're kind of grown up and adults. It's becoming a topic that I'm interested in because I think me and my friends are really changing as we're growing apart and growing older now. And I really feel like sometimes, you know, friendship, especially female friendship, is not talked about enough, it's not championed enough, and also the complexities that come in with that. This is also a novel, by the way. It's not like a piece of non-fiction, but I'm really enjoying it so far. I really want to read more Anna Hope because I was desperate to read The Ballroom, but I never got around to it, so I think I'm going to read it. But at the moment I am really enjoying it, so this is my current read. The next is a non-fiction book, and it's How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell. I don't think I've talked about this a lot, but I think I will do a proper video on it. Is that I am basically obsessed with like, I guess not self-help, but kind of books that help you navigate the online world, or business now, or society, especially for people who are really active online. And this book talks about the idea of the attention economy in a world where we're constantly expected to always be present or always be active, especially in terms of having an online persona. But one thing I noticed, and one reason that I was inspired to pick this up, is that I had one day when I'd said to myself, look, don't do anything, just sit, maybe, I don't know, watch a bit of TV, really recoup and have some time relaxing. And trying to do nothing was like the most stressful thing. I think it comes from when you're at university, and you've always got an essay to do. There is always more studying to be done, and it really like makes you feel so guilty, and it's so ingrained, I think, after a certain amount of time. And when I was having my day when I was supposed to be just lazy, I started doing my finances, and you know, I signed up to a Monzo card and started saving pots. And then I was like, well, now I'm doing my finances, I better look at our wedding and look at our budget. And then I was like, well, obviously I'm going to clean now because I've got all this time, and I've got all this time, so I should really be making a YouTube video. Like, I would be wasting my time if I didn't do a YouTube video. And I spoke to one of my friends about it, and she said that like one of the worst words she was taught is productive. And even though I know we need to be productive in society because capitalism, I mean, that's what capitalism tells us. This is all to do with capitalism and how bad it is. But, you know, productivity is good, I think, in the way that it gives you a sense of self-worth and identity, but it can also be really detrimental, and especially in an increasingly online world where even though you're doing nothing, you're almost constantly doing something, or you're still always active online. I think it's just time for me to read a book like this. The Warlow Experiment by Alex Nathan. Now, I did pick up this again because of Instagram. I literally find all my books through Instagram. So when publishers say it's not like a particularly good platform, I always disagree because that's where I find my books. Anyway, as is already really obvious, I love historical fiction, and Serpent's Tail, who published this book, also publish The Essex Serpent, and I have never actually read a book they've published that I haven't loved, like seriously loved. I knew that it would be something I would really find interesting, and also these end pages are like beautiful. So by quickly reading the blurb, it's about a radical experiment in isolation. For 7 years, the subject will inhabit 3 rooms in the cellar of the manor house, fitted with books, paintings, and even a chamber organ. Meals will arrive thrice daily via a dumb waiter. The solitude will be unbelieved by any social contact. The subject will keep a diary of his daily thoughts and actions. The pay, £50 per annum for life. And it's taken up by John Warlow. It says, it's a seductive tale of self-delusion and obsession. Alex Nathan has created an utterly transporting historical novel which is both elegant and unforgettably sinister. That is 100% what I want in a novel. I love dark historical novels, and I am so excited to read this, and also Sprayed Edges. It's just a beautiful book. So finally, I was about to say some like guilty pleasure books, but I am trying to get away from describing them as guilty pleasure books and just as books that I want to read. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll probably already know because I've been posting about it. But I have started to read the 6 Tudor Queen series by Alison Weir. This is the Catherine of Aragon one. This is one that I'm actually currently reading. Yes, I read a lot of books at the same time, which explains why I never finish anything. But I'm really enjoying it. I actually really love Catherine of Aragon. I think all of the women in the Tudor history are really fascinating and each have their strengths, weaknesses, because they're women, you know, they're complex figures. But I actually think she's got a really interesting life. At the beginning, I thought I don't really like this because I think Alison Weir is amazing as a historian, but I don't always think her fiction is as strong. But actually, I'm enjoying this. I think I was just kind of warming up to her writing style again, and we'll see. But I really want to read this series because it's a nice way of learning more about the period through fiction, because one thing about Alison Weir is that she is so true to history. Like, she's remarkable, and sometimes I think, let it go, Alison, because sometimes the fun of fiction is, you know, the really emotional stuff, rather than sticking so closely to the historical record, which is one reason, to be honest, I love Philippa Gregory, because I think that's what she does so well. But anyway, so I'm already reading this, so I wanted to pick up the next 2. Anne Boleyn, like, probably one of my favourites, because I think full of contradictions. Anne Boleyn has been depicted in kind of quote-unquote the whore, or as the victim, and has a really interesting history. She's also actually one of the queens we know less about, strangely. Anne Boleyn, she was one of the reasons I started loving Tudor history, so I'm definitely gonna enjoy this. And the last book I brought is the next one, which is about Jane Seymour. I actually know very little about Jane Seymour because I think, to be honest, I was like Anne Boleyn and saw Jane Seymour was kind of like the afterthought. But obviously she was a woman in her own right. Each one has like a subtitle, and this one is The Haunted Queen, and I actually am interested in her kind of emotional journey, because what must it have been like marrying someone with the knowing, you know, I mean, Anne Boleyn had the same, like, you have to produce a male heir, but what must it have been like when your predecessor has not just been divorced or annulled, like, she's been killed. Anne Boleyn was very outspoken, and I think it was quite widely accepted that Jane wasn't outspoken, and you kind of think that I can understand why she wasn't, or why she was more hesitant in certain situations, because look what happened to the last one. And I'm just intrigued. I kind of want to know who Jane was, and again, Alison was really good at research, so I know that she would have done a lot for it. So those are all the books I bought for my birthday. I actually quite like seeing them all together because it basically shows what I did, which is why I like buying books sometimes, because I do attach a lot of memories of like where I got them or why I bought them at the time. If you would like to wish me a happy birthday, please tip me on Coffee. Coffee is an online tip jar that I use, and it's not a subscription service like Patreon or anything like that, so you can just do it once and then never think about it again. But I always put the link to that in the description, and I would be really, really grateful if you enjoy my videos that you would do that. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a lovely week.